I speak to you in the name of God, Creator, Redeemer, life-giving Spirit. Amen. It wasn't supposed to end this way. 2 weeks before his surgery, Keith was in church. We talked about his hernia. We laughed about it. I've had a few myself, so I told him what a breeze it was going to be. After all, Keith walked everywhere, even to church that morning, as he usually did. He was in perfect shape. And since he was so careful and prepared for everything, I knew he'd follow the hospital's post-op instructions to the letter. He probably had a binder tucked away in his backpack with his own recovery checklist. Keith could organize anything. It wasn't supposed to end this way. And here we are, trying to make sense of his loss, holding on to our faith, and looking for comfort and hope. The gospel that we just heard as we celebrate Keith's life is so appropriate and in so many ways. There's the obvious. In my Father's house, there are many dwelling places. Comforting words for all of us who wonder what is beyond this life. Knowing that there is a place prepared for us, for Keith, for others that we see no more, for ourselves. And what better gospel for a person who literally helped to create many dwelling places, as Keith did through his generosity to Loft. But now it's time to go below the surface. There's something deeper in this gospel, in this moment that Jesus shares with the disciples. It speaks to how Keith lived his life. For the people that inspire us the most, they not only teach us how to live, but how to live on after they are no longer with us. In this part of John's Gospel, the end is near. Jesus knows it, but the disciples don't have a clue. So he starts to say his poignant goodbyes to those he loves. It's part of the reason why we're here, isn't it? To say our farewells to Keith, whom we love. So in this reading we just heard, Judas has just betrayed him. And Jesus has just told Peter that he will deny him. And the other disciples are just sitting there in this stupefied silence, waiting to see what happens next. Like us, the disciples are thinking, it wasn't supposed to end this way. And as we enter the reading today, Jesus knows that death is near, but that life must go on for just a little longer. He needs to hold on just for a while and comfort the ones he loves. And then he needs to let go and surrender to God's will. And like anyone who loves deeply, like Keith, What he wants to say to his beloved are words of comfort. He wants them to know that death is not the end, that new life will come, that in the end, grief will be overcome by gratitude. Do not let your hearts be troubled, he says. I go to prepare a place for you. But he has already prepared a place for them. He's prepared them for his death by the way that he lived. Keith did too. He prepared us for today by living the kind of life that he lived. Everything that we've heard about. I wonder what's going to happen to that Tilly hat. That's been on my mind all morning. One of the things I admired most about Keith was his authenticity, right? You had this sense that when he was speaking to you, that there was no difference between who he was at the core of his being and the person that he presented to the world. We all try and shed our masks. Keith didn't have to. But most of all, as with our gospel reading, Keith knew when to hold on and when to let go. And throughout his life, he did hold on to what was important. Sharing his life with family and friends anywhere and everywhere. Walking from deep connection to deep connection. Showing compassion for those who were looking for a place to call home. His own personal sense of integrity. But most of all, what he held on to, what I experienced, was a deep faith in God and a deep love for his community. This church, all of us. He collected so many of us. Look at all the clergy here. There are scores of callers in the place. He collected us too. He knew how to hold on. But he also had the wisdom and the strength of character to know how to let go of what was not important. Heather, Dan have spoken to his deep humility. He knew what wasn't important. Riches he heeded not, nor the world's empty praise, as the hymn goes. So today, as we gather to give thanks for Keith's life, we find ourselves living that metaphor by which Keith lived and died. For us today, it is a time to hold on and to let go. Today, those of us who loved Keith the most hold on to everything that he meant to us. But today we also begin to let go. We gather to give thanks for Keith's life in the midst of our grief and loss, but confident that casting our cares and sorrows on God and on one another, that the time will come when we will let go of our grief and remember Keith without the shadow of despair on our hearts, but in a sheer spirit of gratitude for all that Keith continues to mean to us. We hold on to the hope and confidence that God does not abandon us. in our grief or in our death. And that as we give ourselves over to God's compassionate embrace, God will never let go.